Going here. All right, so from behind the camera, I welcome you to the third in our fall series of Becoming College Faculty, or more specifically, the THE program, Teaching in the Higher Ed Environment. Our presentation today is on assessment, and our presenter is Dr. Sana Park, who is an associate professor in the School of Communications and Information Systems, and more specifically in the Department of Communication. With that, Sana, I hand the floor off to you and say thank you for doing the presentation for us.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming today. As you know, today's session is on assessment. And today we're going to talk about what is assessment, and then we are going to talk about key terms associated with assessment and several methods of assessments. And we are going to talk about differences between the subjective and objective, and differences between the summative and formative and other methods. So let me start with a question. How many of you have been involved in developing assessment in the past? Most of you. And then can you tell me what did you assess in the past? What was the method you used, or what was your experience? Briefly, what did you assess?
Either what you assess or which method you use.
Yeah.
Go in whatever order you want.
Anything, any experience? Yes.
We just did ABET assessment, so we were doing pretty much summative assessment on the student outcomes related to ABET outcomes.
Outcomes. And any other comments? Yes.
We've done assessments on adopting a new curriculum, on comparing two classrooms with the old curriculum and a new curriculum, and what we wanted to do regarding changes in the curriculum.
So response from you, you assess some of the outcomes, and you use assessments to compare the old curriculum and new curriculum, and you use it to revise curriculum.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk about those after we talk about what is assessment. So what is assessment? So from the literature review and the education researcher, assessment is defined as systematic collection, review, and use of information about educational program undertaken for the purpose of improved student learning and development. So key point is gathering information, collection of information in order to improve student learning. So assessment is not assessing teaching effectiveness of instructor. We are assessing student learning outcomes that occurred during the class or across the program. And how is it different from the grading and assessment? So probably already doing assessment in your class, but you just don't use the term assessment. So we're going to talk about how is it different from between assessment and grading and the assessment assignment. And then we're going to talk about why we are assessing, and then how we can use the result of assessing, and what's the procedure of assessment that we can carry out. So we talked about the definition of assessment, how assessment is different from grade. Because you are grading annual student work, and then students get their grade, and then you also do assessment, and how they are different.
I mean, to me, it would seem like a grade is a one-time evaluation of one assignment, while assessment would be more systematic, meaning it would take place over an entire semester.
That's correct. When you think of a grading that you are giving to students, it's kind of score. Score is a sum of total student performance. It doesn't tell us their stage of learning, but assessment, we can report and we can track student learning process that has been occurred during the course or until at the end of the course. Those are different. So we can give them grade A, B, C, D, but assessment report and the result of assessment is more systematic, just like Dr. Anthony taught us. And what is assignment? Assignment is a tool that we can use for the assessment. As we are listing the assignment on our syllabus, and then everyone has assignment that we're going to give to students. We are using those assignments to assess student learning. So key point is that what we are assessing is student learning outcomes that they have, that they can get from the course that we are teaching. That is a key point. So assessment is not the same thing as a grade. It is more systematic to track the student learning outcomes. And why we are assessing? I keep emphasizing that we are assessing to improve teaching and student learning. But assessment is not evaluating our teaching effectiveness. Assessment is evaluating student learning outcomes to check whether students learned in a way that we designed, we intended to. So it systematically links assignment to intended learning goals and objectives. What kind of assignment are you giving to? Why are you giving to? Because you have intended learning goals and objectives that students want to learn from your course, and you need to check whether they actually learned or not. So with the link between assignment and goals, this is a process of assessment. And also, assessment result offers us specific feedback on what works with the students and what does not. Last session, we talked about from the Larry Thomas session, each people has different level of learning. So even though we give same materials to students, it works for some students, but it doesn't work for some others. So that's the reason why we need to assess student learning progress. So we talked about what is assessment, why is it important, why we are doing it, the purpose of assessment at the time that we need. So we will talk about what's the procedure of doing assessment, where we need to start, where to start. So the first time I heard about assessment is when I wrote down my first faculty annual report. Until that time, I never heard about assessment. But I got an email, submit your assessment. What is assessment? I didn't know that. So I visited my mentor and then asked her what is assessment, how I need to do it. So first thing she mentioned is use goals and objective. And our department has a template that we can use for assessment. And first step is identify which goals and objectives you want to use to assess your student learning outcomes. And before we talk about how we can define goals and objectives, do you know what's the difference between goals and objectives that we are using on our syllabus?
It separates a goal from an objective.
Yes.
Isn't a goal sort of like the end outcome and objectives are like the steps to get to it?
So goals is just like you said, what you want students to learn. So more broad concept. I'm from communication department. So one of our department goal is we want students to learn about the communication concepts and theory. So those broad term or concept that we want students to learn. But what is the objective? So you have something that we want the student to learn, but objective is what students should be able to after take our courses to meet the goal of understanding communication. So for example, it's more specific. So it's just something that students should be able to demonstrate. So we can say that we want students should be able to identify some of the concept, or students should be able to criticize or critique the communication concept and theory, or synthesize communication concept and theory. So it's more specific. So objective can be the evidence of student learning that we can check. So it's more specific. It's evidence of whether students meet the goal that we intended. So it's more specific. So this is the first step. So we talked the goals and objective. And we also already learned about the Bloom's taxonomy, and that we can use it to address the student's level of educational objective. And then Larry Thomas shows us a different level under the Bloom's taxonomy, and then it is good to use when we create objective, because it shows a different level of the educational objective that we are setting for students. So first level is, we all know that understanding something. So as a basic level, when you teach something, we want students to learn something and understand what it is. So it is for checking their knowledge. So if our goal or objective is checking their knowledge, we can use some verbs that is associated with each level. So first level is knowledge, understanding. So how we can check with which objective? We can use some action verbs such as students should be able to list at least 3 different communication theories, or should be able to identify the factors under each communication theory. So there's a specific verbs that is associated with each level. So these are verbs that we can use to create the objective. Why we are concerned about the choosing important verb, action verb, means that we want them to demonstrate in a way that we use a verb. If we use an analyze verb as a level for analysis, then we need to check whether they are able to analyze some of the concept or apply into real world. So by using those specific verb, action verb, we can check their student learning outcomes in the assessment process. So Bloom's taxonomy is really good, useful tool to create objective. So we all understand that, okay, first step is defining goals and objectives. So before we start outcome assessment, our department also review the existing goals and objectives under our department, and also ask us to see whether our objective that we are using in our syllabus is really good objective by using this action verb, or it covered all level of Bloom's taxonomy. Department program goals and objectives should include all different levels that Bloom's taxonomy that introduced us. So we established and identified student learning and goals and objectives. And then next step is, instead of creating new objective, instead of creating new method for assessment plan, what about just see whether these goals that you already made have been met, or see existing assessment techniques that you already use, or existing assignment, and see whether this assignment is a good tool to check student learning outcomes. So go to your syllabus and see whether your syllabus has a list of assignments and whether these assignments exactly match to check student learning outcomes that are intended in or stressed out in the objective. So reviewing course syllabus is important, because when you report assessment, sometimes it is required to attach our syllabus to check whether the outcome result that we report is exactly matched to objective on the syllabus. So they require the course syllabus sometimes if it is for formal purpose of reporting in terms of a department to course review. So review course syllabus is important because it has goals and objectives. And also, this is tool to communicate between us and the students. So if we have objective on syllabus, students will see what they're going to learn. And students will see what assignment or what each assignment list and what we expect from students to do for each assignment. And I keep emphasizing that we are assessing student learning outcomes. I am teaching public relations courses, and if we hire somebody who said that I can teach public relations because he or she already taken some of the courses in public relations, but what if he's more expertise in advertising? Mm-hmm. So he teaches advertising in PR course. It's really great. Students love to learn about advertising. It's very exciting to learn, and he's great. So in terms of his teaching effectiveness is great, excellent. But what about learning outcomes? The course was designed in a way that for the student outcome learning about public relations, but they learned about PR, so which is not undesirable result of the student learning outcomes. So we are assessing student learning outcomes to track their progress or whether they meet the course goal that we designed. So as the initial step, as our department listed all the course goals and objectives that we are using as a department, we call them as department goals and objectives. And then each column is a list of courses. Then as an initial step, our department start to choose one specific objective under specific goals, and then list those objectives, and then write down what assessment tool do we use to check those objectives was met or not. So this is kind of a rubric or mapping goals with course list that other department is also using.
I know that's kind of small to see, just because we got a lot of information on there. But if you notice the numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're sort of highlighted in gray, those would be our department goals. And then the A's and B's, or A's, B's, and C's, whatever it might be, those are the various objectives. And then across the top there, how many courses do we have? 40-something, 50-something? I forget the exact number. If we could, in other words, in COM, create an entire spreadsheet that goes 50 some odd columns, and we can be able to say, okay, and again, it's sort of hard to see, but if you look at number 1, understanding of communications, concepts, and theories, and then under A, my eyesight's terrible, so forgive me for squinting, demonstrate comprehension of communication concepts and theories, you'll notice the first and the third boxes are checked. That means in those classes, whatever those numbers are up there, and I can't read them unfortunately, that objective should be A, on the syllabus, and B, measurable in terms of looking at what our students do.
Yeah. The reason why we create this table is that we can tell whether each course under our curriculum was designed to check each of objective under each goal. Also, it is good for external use. When accreditation external reviews see this chart, what if there's no course to check one of each objective? So there should be the across. So each course should has one objective to check their student learning outcome, but all the objectives should be checked whether those objectives was met or not. So it is good for us and good for external review board. So we know the importance of identifying goals and objectives. What's the next? Then how we can start assessment. So we need to select when we're going to assess and how often we are going to assess student learning outcome, which talks about types of assessment. So I'm going to talk about different types of assessment that our textbook talked about. First one is assessment can be categorized either objective or subjective. So across all types of assignment that you are giving to students, some assignment has only one correct answer, such as multiple choice or true and false question. This is a method that we are using objective assignment. And subjective assignment is there's no one correct answer. There's multiple answers. So such as essays or reaction papers or project, it doesn't have any correct answer. It can have multiple answers. So these are two different types of assessment, which means any assignments can be a tool for assessing student learning outcomes. But drawback of subjective assessment is since there's no correct answer, we are based on our interpretation, personal interpretation on their quality of work. So how we can address those issues of fairness. If we're using scored rubric, because I know that many of you instructors give the rubric that students can use. So if we are using scored rubric, is really good tool to using subjective assessment. Scored rubric means that we are listing all the identified criteria that students can see what they need to include in their project or portfolio. Then with those identified criteria, we are giving them number of the points that students get. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and also expected level for students when they get 0.1. And what's the condition that they can get the 0.2? So from 1 to 5 or 0 to 4. So depending on how you make a scale for those criteria. Do you have any questions? So you will see probably this looking for the differences among your assignments. Then the other types of assessment is we can classify our assessment either formative and summative. depending on when we are assessing. So formative is to check, measure students' outcome to see whether it is forming during the course. And summative is checking and measure students' outcome at specific time in time, usually at the end of the course or at the end of your instruction on each chapter. So formative is good to use, track student progress. One of the example is pre and post test. So if you test at the beginning of the course to check their knowledge level before you start the lecture on your course, then you are doing post test at the end of each instruction on each chapter or at the end of the course and see the progress of students' learning outcome, whether it was increased or decreased, compare the outcomes of pre and post test. Because it happens, student learning is occur over the semester and from the beginning of the semester until the end of the semester. And portfolio might be also formative because students creating their formative over time, so they build a portfolio from beginning of the program until the end of the program. You can check their progress, see their quality of work. And summative is such as midterm exam and final exam, and we can check their overall learning and then at the end of a semester. So usually checking their knowledge at the end of a course or at the end of the semester. So these are two different. Do you have any questions? No? So when we are assessing, and so one of the sources that I look at is they use the term as overtime assessment for formative and then at specific point in time for summative. And the other type that we can talk about assessment is whether it's formal or informal. When we report our assessment outcome result, probably only report about the formal assessment. And formal assessment means that you already give an announcement about the assignment and the assignment that you're going to use, and it is on the syllabus. So it is given to students already, is announced, and periodically you are assessing with those assignments. So these are the formal assessment. Informal assessment is quick and simple, so such as conversation or Q&A sections. It's not listed on syllabus. At the end of your instruction, you can say, is there any question? Do you have any question? Those are checking whether they understand, whether they have a question. Those are informal. So if you think of formal, informal, it's easy to understand. But when we think about formative and summative with informal and formal, think about those combinations. So first, I mentioned that informal is Q&A. Do you have any question during the class? Since this is during the class, during the semester, is formative. So informal formative assessment is Q&A session. And if you see the final exam is summative. And exam is formal because I already announced that we are going to take exam on which date, specific date. So this is exam. And then what about the formal and formative is pre and post test. And formative, pre and post test is formative because it is see students progress on their learning outcomes. So compare pre and post test results. So it is formal and formative. And what is informal and summative? So sometimes discussion session after your each instruction might be informal. So you don't have to score their discussion. So you give some lecture on some of the topic that you are teaching and then get them talk. Give them some of the exercise activity that they can discuss. Whether they understand correctly or not, or get them discuss about topic, then they will have some moment to think about it. So for informal summative, you are not grading them, but you can check by listening their discussion whether they understand correctly or not. When you think about formal and formative, in terms of quiz, sometimes you list a quiz, like you are gonna take 10 quiz, this is formal. So this is formal during the class, which is formative and formal. But what about pop quiz? Pop quiz might be informal, because when I don't have to record or count it as a point for them to get. The reason why I'm doing pop quiz is after I give them instruction about the PR history. I know that students don't read the textbook, but I want them to learn. I want them to understand, even though they do not read the textbook. So I check, even though they don't read textbook, whether they understand correctly or not. If not, how many percentage of textbook they understand, even though they didn't read the textbook right after I teach the PR history. So it might be informal if I conduct pop quiz when I do not grade. But if it is so, for example, for pop quiz, immediate quiz, when I don't grade, that might be informal, formative, because I'm doing pop quiz during the class, but it is informal. Do you have any questions? Does it make sense to you to see the differences between formal and informal?
So one quick question.
Yeah.
So with the pop quiz, so it wasn't announced. You give it after this lecture the student is given. But what if you choose to grade it? Now have you made it formal?
Yeah, I think so.
Even though it wasn't announced?
Depending on purpose of your assessment, but for me, if it is even though it's announced, yeah, I think it might be informal if it is not announced, because even though you're grading, but are you grading them for unannounced quiz for your class?
Oh, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. So depending, it's kind of tricky. Immediate quiz and pop quiz. So to clarify, the immediate quiz might be the formal if you are grading, but if you are not grading them, it might be informal. Does it clear?
Yes, I'm just curious why you would
Yeah.
give a
So if you are
quiz that you
grading
would
the
grade.
quiz, even though it is a pop quiz, I think it is formal,
Mhm.
because you have some data for the immediate quiz, unannounced quiz. So you have the data that you got from students. You can see during the middle of the class from the immediate quiz how they make a progress. So, does it clear? Does it answer to you? Yeah. And the other types of assessments that the assessment researcher talks about is direct measurement of assessment, indirect measurement assessment. Direct measurement assessment is evidence of student work. So when we ask students to display their work, such as all the assignment result you got from students, all the material you got from students might be the direct measurement of assessment. Test, essay, assignment, portfolio, and project, any type of work that students demonstrate to us as their work. But indirect measurement is assessing evidence of student attitude toward learning. We are not seeing student work, but we are measuring their perception and their feelings toward the learning that they are taking from the class. So conducting surveys with the student, interview with the student about asking about the course. So sometimes we can do student evaluation on the course, not on the instructor. So those are the indirect measurement of assessment. Do you have any questions? So we know all different types of assessment, and you may have a sense to, okay, I'm already using these assignment and assessment method, and then so you can get some data, or you already have a data for this semester, but how you can use, how you can understand those data, and how you can interpret, how you can use it. So we are going to talk about last step of assessment procedure. Interpreting and using the result of assessment. Because you have a data, but you need to use it, you need to report it. And when we report our result of assessment, the key factor is who's the audience, someone who are going to see our report. So we need to think about potential audiences. Why you're assessing? What's the purpose of assessing? Is it for course review assessment to check whether we need to revise our curriculum or not, or is it for the just reporting department chair or department level review, or is it for accreditation body to serve external needs for our institution? You need to check who's going to be our potential audiences, because depending on our potential audiences, the purpose of assessment is different. If it is for our faculty member inside of our department, we can use it as curriculum revision. For example, when I taught the 4,000 level OPR campaign, I checked that students didn't take the 2,000 level OPR course. So student knowledge level even before start the campaign is so broad. So some students has little knowledge about PR. Some students didn't even know what the PR is. So I found that at the point when I'm writing the assessment report, I can recognize that during the class, because when I have a conversation with them, but the moment that I thought about maybe is this because that there's no prerequisite for campaign, so I wrote down that on the report of my assessment, and it was reported to department chair, and we discussed about having prerequisite for campaign in our department faculty meeting. But what if it is for external review, or is it for provost? Instead of using it for curriculum revision, we can use for emphasize or stress out the strength of our department, how our department facilitates student learning, how great we are. So we can emphasize those things depending on whose audience is. Also, audience also impact on the format of the report. Depending on whose our audience is, a report might be simple as a presentation to faculty member. Here's what I found, and here's a thing that we need to discuss. Or it may be as complex as a report to the provost to see, here's the data, here's the analysis of data, here's the interpretation. Because a more external review board accreditation body require us to more complicated analysis with chart and data or quotation from interview if we use indirect measurement of assessment. So you may ask, is there any guideline that we can use, or how we can report our assessment data? There's 5 components that you can think about. We talked about start with goal and objective to talk about what we are assessing, what we want to check in terms of student learning outcomes. So you need to address or identify goals and objectives at the first top of your assessment report. Then next, method. Assessment method. What kind of assessment method you used? So and how you carried out. So in an assessment report, you state clear goals and objectives you used from department goal or from your course goal under your syllabus, and then describe what method you used, how you carried out, when start, when was finished. And then after the description of method, write down result. So you can state types of data you collect, or in the result, it may be the simple as just saying that how many percentage of students got the prior knowledge before they take, or how percentage of students didn't get the knowledge before they take. So just describe all the number or fact that you got from the data. And then interpretation. What do these results tell you? So what this tell you, so you can interpret the data. It's like research paper from the method section. So in the method section, you are describe what method you use, how you carried out, and then discussion is your interpretation. What this tells you about your course or our program. And then action to take. From the interpretation of your result, you also need to thought about what are you gonna do, which is action to take. Is there anything you're gonna add to your course to improve student learning? So in the interpretation, we can say we successfully met our goal with this student learning outcome, or even undesirable learning outcome might be helpful for you. So we can address other way to increase student learning outcome. For me, for my opinion, I already gave students about the concept or lecture on some specific topic. But at the student outcome, they don't remember, they don't recall what they learned. So I can think about as action to take. I can give more real life example, or I can give them more opportunity to connect the concept that they learn and apply to the real life example. Even for history concept, I can ask them to apply historical model into real life example. So we need to address what are you going to do with this data. Do you have any questions? So I list the source that I use, and then the thing that I'd like to emphasize is that how we can analyze the data. What if I'm the qualitative person? I'm not familiar with statistical analysis, or I'm limited with the statistical analysis, but you don't have to have the good statistical analysis. I think you can just write down with the percentage how many students passed your midterm or midterm exam or not. So you don't have to use more complicated statistical analysis. So just use how you can use. So it is depending on what you want to find out, depending on the objective you used. So linking student learning outcomes to the objective you addressed, objective you intended to meet with the student's outcome is more important way instead of using statistical analysis. And I look at other large research university they have their own office of assessment or academic office of assessment planning. So they have listed all the resources. So I also heard that we, as a RMU in our university, other schools also doing assessments. Each school has special person who are specialized in assessment. Especially for a creative school, they need to do assessment report. So we have really good resources in here. So I hope that RMU has one person or real contact person we can contact when you have questions or concern, or who can give us resources about assessment. So this is my end, and then I'd like to emphasize that it's not for testing or evaluating our teaching effectiveness. It's for assessing student learning outcome, improve student learning from our course.
Any questions?
So, I guess with the objectives, so I give essay questions on my test typically. I might say define this communication theory and then apply to the following real life example. I give a real life example. If my objective is the knowledge level blues, right, just define, I would only, for the assessment purpose, only take that first half of the question, like only kind of grade the first half of the question, right? Because the second half wouldn't really matter regarding the assessment for that objective.
Yeah, I think you're right. So in your essay test, you are testing two different things, which is listing the factor under the specific communication theory, that is checking their knowledge. And second part is whether they actually apply to a communication concept into the real life, which is a higher level of Bloom's taxonomy. So if you address, or if you state that for this assessment, I'm going to use only one specific objective, probably you can only use the first part of the essay.
And we want to use the second.
Yeah, because if you're using second part, which means it might lower your assessment result, or it's are looking at different things. It's not the way that you want to look for a specific objective. It's not matched well. So linking objective with your assessment tool is number one thing, most important key thing.
So you'd even want to look at your multiple choice questions too, right? Because again, my multiple choice, some are doing one objective, some, right? Like they're not all definition questions, they're a mix. So I don't just want to give a final and then say this is the assessment of their learning. I actually want to I need to look at question 1, 5.
Yeah. This is a great idea. So there's a 20 multiple question. So what if you are using all 20 questions checking chapter 1? But you want to look at the understanding of all the components that you address entire course, which means you should pick 3 questions addressing chapter 1, 3 questions addressing chapter 5, or 3 questions addressing the key points that you want to test. that this is important, how you can construct the multiple choice question. So I think, yeah, that's a good point.
One thing that occurred to me during this is, I use a lot of multiple choice tests, and recently I used Blackboard to tag my questions to break them down in chapters so I can easily sort them as if I want to change around my test. But I'm thinking now that I should also tag them with Bloom's taxonomy so I can then, afterwards summarize them and look at how many knowledge-based questions, how students did knowledge-based questions, how students did comprehension questions, and see the levels of achievement at each, level of Bloom's taxonomy, and try to sort of evaluate my test that way, and evaluate my students that way, and see what what they're getting and what they're not getting.
Yeah, so key point is that using multiple assessment method is better way than using only one complex method. So for the Ted talks about he can do checking their knowledge level, that is one method. Even in the same class, he can use the rest part of checking their application level, so which is a separate method, checking the other objective. And do you have any comments to add to assessment?
Just a quick favor. I notice a lot of people trying to jot down the slides. Do you mind emailing them to me? So I can
email you.
okay.
Yeah, you can share
So
it.
I will get those to everybody here. I notice a lot of you were trying to write feverishly. So
I think this is a starting point, so
Yes.
I hope that we have some session like how to create effective scored rubric and how we can use it, or how we can do program assessment level so that our institution emphasizing. So there's a lot of things that we can talk about in the future as an open forum or as another session.
yeah, when I send all of you the link, the YouTube link, I'll also then send you in the same email the PowerPoint slides that Sana presented to us today. So.
And for the homework, there's a lot of exercise for across chapter 12, 13, 14, but I want to think about the complete the table on the page 64, to thinking about types of assessment and then addressing the topic that you are teaching. So it's for designing 8-week course, and then what kinds of assignment that you are going to using to assess their level of education or objective that you're using.
And that's page 64 in the workbook,
64,
right?
Yeah.
In the workbook.
Chapter, yeah.
Okay. And then it's probably easiest, I think, just to maybe just scan that when you're done with it and just email it to me, and I'll make sure that you get it. I don't know, should we make Sana do the homework too? What do you think? Should she have to do it also? I mean, or does she have like an unfair advantage since she did the presentation, right? Double the homework for her, right?
Well, as one of the informal assessment tools.
That's right,
Section
exactly.
was helpful for you, even though you're already doing some of the assessment method. Yeah.
I just have a question, curiosity. Are there any major differences or relationship between classroom assessment, program assessment, or even institutional assessment?
Course level assessment is we are checking only course objective. So we have a list of several course objectives that we are addressing in each course. So no matter who are teaching, whether the students learn the concept that the course that intend to teach. So that's course level. The program level, department level means that we have a list of department course and objective, and then we need to connect which objective under our course is exactly linked to which objective under our department goal and objective. So we have like 6 communication goal and objective. We all know that, and across each course, whether the first objective that in my PR course, foundation PR, which department objective is linked to which objective under my course. So it's more complicated, so I hope that at some point we can have a chance to get lesson about what is a program level assessment, how is it different from the course level assessment. That's the reason I mentioned at the end.
I'm just curious, is Ben's the only department among the people in this room that have an accrediting body that they must answer to? Oh, that's right. CIS is, nursing is, so several of you are part of units that have an external credit, or not a creditor, an external evaluator.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
why I asked the question, because sometimes I've observed the disconnect between the classroom assessment. Students can get very good scores, good percentage passing rate, in the assessments. But program assessment, sometimes they also look at student internships and employment. And that may not match with, their scores.
Yeah, for program assessment, direct measure is to see the senior score. If there is an exam that senior students need to take before they graduate, that is a direct measurement. But like internship or interviewing with senior or interviewing with the alumni, and then we can invite alumni to evaluate our seniors' project, which means we are inviting external review that can evaluate our seniors' project, not by their instructor, which is us.
Any last question? All right. Sanaa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just-
presentation.
Thank you. Just a quick reminder, next week, Gary Davis will be here to talk about some technology options for you in your classes. You will, if you've not gotten an email yet, you will get an email very soon asking you to set up a Question Pro account. And I think that email might have gone out already. I think I sent it a day or two ago. But just in case, go ahead and set those up. If you have any problems with it, let Gary or me know, and we'll try to talk you through it. I know at least one of you already has a Question Pro account set up, but that will be next Wednesday's presentation on the 12th, and then we take the 19th off because that's midterms week or the start of the second 8 weeks for a lot of people, and so we're giving a little bit of a break that week. So now thank you again.
Thank you.
You have homework. She has double. No.
Great. We're supposed to bring our laptops next week?
Yes, bring laptops with you next week so that what Gary is working with, you can essentially follow along at the same time. So, all right, guys, thank you. Have a good rest of the week.
Thank you, David.